Great to have you here. It's Wednesday, the 19th of August here in the UK. I'm saying that. I'm Noel. I'm your not your guest. I'm your host. So there you go. But I'm saying it's Wednesday because it's actually my guest who's joined us, Simon. Simon Gillard is joining us from Australia, and it's actually Thursday where he is, very early on Thursday. So we're very honoured that you're willing to get out of bed at this ridiculous time. What is it, 6 o'clock in the morning over there or something?
Yeah, it's 6 o'clock. Yeah, thanks a lot, Noel. It's I'm on a different planet.
More ways than one, absolutely. Well, we saying just before the show, James and I were going, why is this guy doing this? He's either insane or we still haven't made up our mind. So by the end of the show, maybe we'll know. We'll have a little straw poll amongst the public out there to see which you are. But it's great to have you here, Simon. It was really cool to chat with you early in the week. So one of the things about this whole pandemic thing is this bizarre thing where it's actually brought us closer together.
Absolutely.
I don't think this would have happened, to be honest, that I'd have invited you, a copper from Sydney, onto my show. And I don't think you'd have even considered doing it as well, apart from the pandemic. It's like, yeah, of course, we'll do it now. We've all got used to this sort of Zoom, Skype life where we connect with each other. It's great to have you here. I'm just going to do a bit of business, what they call furniture movement in radio land, which is sort of a few practical things. Like, you know, when you go on these training courses and you go, the toilet's over there. We hear the alarm, it means run.
Yes, the exit that way, yeah. The marshalling out.
I'm going to be the exits are over there. But this is a live broadcast. If you're listening to it, wherever time zone you're on, if it's sort of Wednesday the 19th in sort of some version of that, some connection with 9 o'clock in UK time, so 9 p.m. And if it's outside of that, you're watching it on repeat somewhere. So some of the stuff I'm just about to say doesn't apply to you. But it'd be lovely if you joined us. We're on various platforms. Our YouTube channel. We're on Twitter, I think, through Periscope, and also on Facebook Live. So it'd be really lovely. My team are watching those various channels, and if you sort of drop in some comments, they'll feed them through to me, and we'll sort of try and answer your comments and try and answer your questions. And also you can give me a call on my mobile, which is +44 7506 319 745. That's +44 7506 319 745. Be lovely to hear from you, folks. There's my phone. I'll get you on the. I'll make you famous. There you go. You couldn't want more than that. Anyway, enough of that. Welcome, Simon. Really, really, really cool.
Thanks,
to have you here. Thanks for getting out of bed and joining us. And you're in Sydney at the moment, is that right?
Yeah, in Sydney, Australia. Going through the pandemic over here. Nowhere near the numbers that you guys are. We're in stage 2 lockdown in Sydney at the moment, but we do have a state, Victoria, that's in stage 4, and borders are being closed. So it's read its head quite heavily down there in Australian numbers. So yeah.
And how are you all finding it? How are you sort of coping? How are you coping with the pandemic? And
it rather interestingly at the very start of the pandemic, and I think due to having, which I guess we will discuss, is having post-traumatic stress and sort of the things that come out of post-traumatic stress. I was in a way battle hardened for it, if that makes sense. And it was like, which is quite a paradox. It was like people were joining into my life with a little bit of social anxiety and being a bit more isolated and recluse with PTSD. I hate using PTSD, but we can get into that. But post-traumatic stress, and but now it's started to wear me down as well a little bit. But I just try to follow my resilience, sort of boosters that I have and things we can talk about. But it's difficult, and it's difficult. My wife is working from home constantly, so there's that aspect. We had. I was doing a lot of teaching for my 6-year-old, so was trying to get her to call me Mr. Gillard, and I wore a bow tie. I didn't, but yeah, she. So yeah, doing the teaching, homeschooling and things like that. So it's been difficult, and I think we're all in it together, no matter where we are in the world. It's a difficult thing, but it will pass. That's the thing we've got to look for. So
yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think we're in a sort of there'll be different phases of it. We're in a new phase now, which is over the initial panic, realizing it's a bit of a longer haul than we anticipated, and then getting used to the fact that these lockdown measures will come in and out of our lives for a while to come. But as you say, they will end. But it's interesting, I think, that what you said about initially, you read the warning signs, and because of your own experience of having a significant sort of mental health issue, you went into all your very positive mechanisms to look after yourself. And that's a common sort of response that I've heard from a number of people that have a history of sort of psychological distress, that they just went, okay, this is going to be hard work. I better start doing all those things that I was taught to do.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. But at this stage, I think most of us are a bit tired of it. And I think we'll find that these resilience strategies are sort of beginning to wear a bit thin, and we need to think about it a little bit. But you've mentioned this term PTSD a few times, which I think a lot of people who've tuned in will get a sense of, or will have some sense of what that is. Can you tell me what you mean by PTSD, and sort of both what you understand it to be clinically, but also as a person that's experienced it? What was that like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was a police officer, a detective sergeant in the New South Wales Police for 16 years. And I fought against what I call compassion fatigue. I never wanted to lose the basis of why I joined the police, and so many other police are like that. And it's a little bit of a contradictory measure in many ways, is that you join the police, such as joining the army, nursing, doctors, all of those, fire brigade, we could go through paramedics, to make a difference and to help. And what can happen over a period of time, and depending on which way you go with it, is if you formulate or you have burnout, you have compassion fatigue, secondary traumatic stress, vicarious trauma, and you don't start filing those things away correctly that are in your mind and that sit there, and being able to talk about them. What can happen is that because you're always, to some degree, you're always in a fight or flight, and trying to survive throughout the serious nature of the work that you're doing, is that can be ingrained in your mind. And I fought against for a number of years without seeking help. And I actually speak about being a very true paradox of something not to do, because the earlier we put our hands up, the better. And the things that reared its head at the time were night terrors, nightmares, those things from the past that I couldn't sleep. I remember in 1 week having about 8 hours sleep in 1 week, just from waking all the time, but still have to function and highly function as a detective sergeant at work. Then you also have things like that there's mistrust that comes into post-traumatic stress as well. So there's mistrust of the environment and through hypervigilance. So you're always in a fight or flight stage, and it becomes ingrained. And you can find it hard to trust people at times, or different people, and you're very in tune with what's around you all the time. Exactly, you can read things. Like if I go to dinner with my wife, I can read a room because I'm on high alert all the time and see, okay, there's an exit there, that person's there, that looking at around while my wife's going, I wonder what I'll have for dinner. But I'm reading everything that's going on. And because of that hypervigilance, you can formulate a little bit like anxiety and those. So post-traumatic stress is very similar to the nature of anxiety, like clinically as well. It's hugely crossed over. And I think that there's 4 clusters and 7 major ones that come out of that for post-traumatic stress. And so the anxiety, the sleep disturbances, sometimes there's you can be a little bit irrational in regards to your behaviours can be a little bit, when you're extremely down, you can do things that, if I get, I don't care, like whatever happens. You're not, because you're also depressed. Depression kicks in as well, which has for me. And so all of those sort of things. And you can get angered when you see moral injustices in the world taking place, and you see someone do something bad to someone. For example, things with children, things with the elderly, people who are vulnerable. You can get so angry about those type of things, of those injustices, where and more so than anyone else. So these are sort of things, and I still have waves of that. At times it's gotten better. It can rear its head. I try to use resilience, but resilience has, what is resilience? And I call it the lion's cage. Like, you still got a leg in a lion's cage. How do you be resilient? Yeah. So, like you said before, I think that's a brilliant thing you said. Is I think there's, it's wearing thin now, our resilience. We can't, be in the same hostile or terrible situation and remain resilient. It just doesn't work, if that makes sense. It's like having domestic violence. Be resilient, and then going back to a violent environment. How does one stay resilient?
Some sort of impact. So, how long do you think it took you? You were sort of, when did you join the police? How long ago was it that you joined the police?
I joined in '96, and I did 16 years. So I joined at 19. I joined at around 19 and after high school. Something I always wanted to do from the age of 10. Police came to my primary school, and lights and sirens, and I thought, wow, that's I thought they were superheroes. That's what I wanted to do, and from there moved forward through high school, and something I always wanted to do, and left high school and joined up, and went down the academy. Loved everything about it. I had a great time in the police as well. So otherwise, wouldn't have stayed in as long as I did, and I was resilient.
How long is the training in Australia? I'm just interested, sort of.
So the training is, you do 6 months at the academy. I was on an older system where it was more paramilitary, so more regimented. Now it's very much university based, but when I joined, it 6 months at the academy, and so you stand on the parade ground at 5:30, 6 in the morning, and it's in a place called Goulburn in New South Wales, and you get sleet there. It's very cold, and be exactly like England, I guess. So I'm just saying, but it's very cold. So there's sleet on the parade ground, and you're standing there, and you got to spit polish your shoes, and you'll have a sergeant walk along and get right in your face. Why aren't your shoes spit polished? And people used to use a thing called I can't remember the name. It started with C or something, and it was like a fake spit polish. And they used to rub that on, and the sergeant used to wipe your foot, and if it came off like that, you'd want a 4-page report in his desk the next morning. And so it's 6 months down there. It was fantastic, and then you go out on what's called probation.
Yeah,
and
I can't imagine in that training that they did a lot of psychological awareness with you about self-care and look after yourself and resilience skills. I don't know, but I can't imagine that it was that sort of training.
Absolutely, and then that has changed a great deal because we've become more aware of that. So the training now does have many aspects of. We look at peer support training, which also happens now down at the academy, and so it has been. There are a lot more measures now, like living in today, and since when I joined, and then even from saying that. Like when I worked and went out, I was working with police sergeants, inspectors who joined in the 60s.
Yeah.
So, and then there was another world apart there again, they were just, So, but it has changed. It has changed, but there wasn't at the time. I was. So
there you are, this 19-year-old kid, because you're still, neurologically, you're definitely still forming. Our brains neurologically are forming till about 24 anyway, the personality structures and neuroplasticity. So you're 19, you get the sort of training which is sort of paramilitary, which is great fun. I guess it would have been fun. I would have really enjoyed it at that age.
Yeah, it was great.
all that sort of stuff would have been ideal, but not necessarily preparing you for any sort of psychological fallout. And also at the age of 19, how much do you listen to that stuff anyway, to be honest, a 19-year-old bloke?
Yeah, look, absolutely. And during that time, you have, say you have 4 weeks during that 6-month period, and you have that out as a student police officer out at a police station. And that's when I saw my first dead body. It was a person who had drunk the whole unit. I'll never forget it. And it's amazing. This goes back to that thing of where things become ingrained in your mind. And I could smell still remind me of that scene.
Yeah.
The particular beer the man was drinking, the whole unit was just covered in this particular beer. It was called Victoria Bitter. I don't know if you've heard of that, but
I know. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So it was VB, it was beer, and it was everywhere. And he was lying there. His family couldn't get in touch with him, so it was a concern for welfare. We went over there, and I was just a student, 19, and broke in. He was lying, and I'll never forget where he was lying. And I was with a senior officer, and I had to move things away and hold his arm back again. And that was the first time I had all those senses with the touch, the smell, and all of those things at 19 years of age. And my partner, he was a more obviously a senior constable, and he started doing compressions, and he thought he felt a heartbeat and stuff. And I'll never forget while he was doing that, and the saving of life, overplays any potential injury. So as he was doing the compressions, I heard, and I'll never forget, I heard a couple of cracks.
Yeah.
And they were ribs, and it was part of that. And as you're saying, at 19, I was going, wow, I can still remember hearing the cracks, and he cracked a couple of ribs, but trying to save this man's life. That's secondary to obviously saving life, but that's still there with me today, as you're saying. And it becomes ingrained, the smell, the touch. So all your senses, I guess, we have 5 senses, and all those 5 senses are just really put into
you're
place.
alert going to the call out anyway, aren't you? Because the adrenaline's already going, because you're out of shanked and all that sort of stuff, and so you're soaking this stuff in. You're not sort of defended against it. So it's
right.
And then how long were you in the police force for after that? How many years?
16 years.
16
years, yeah. And you find most police, it's interesting with that the whole resilience part of things. And there was a much harder line back then as well, where no, you don't really talk about any of your issues or problems. It was like the old stiff upper lip and, get on with it type sort of scenario. But I used to walk around with police at that time as well, and there's many stories where that happened, and that they'd fallen to compassion fatigue. Yeah. They were like shells of people, and it was really sad to see that. Is that they joined to care to make a difference, and because either they've just gone through so much without a break, and there's probably coinciding with that moral injury and things like that have taken place, they've become a shell of a person. And in doing so, the care factor is very lost. And it's not a good thing to happen for not just the police and the police force, but for the public. So someone will come to the counter to report something, go to a job, and they're just like, they've become a shell. And it's really quite sad to see.
And then it can explain a lot of behaviours that we see sometimes on social media and stuff like that. That actually it's not the label that it's given. It's actually another psychological process that's going on, where somebody's overwhelmed and burnt out and can't cope. And often we don't sort of project empathically onto people, particularly people in authority positions such as police. We don't sort of see the internal world of that person very much. I think we're beginning to understand that much more. And in many ways, people have much more empathy and sympathy for soldiers, for example, and understand that. We've seen Rambo, but there hasn't been Rambo for the police force yet. We haven't had that film, which really opens up those issues. But they're rife. And I guess with other first responders, again, that people are more likely in some ways to have an empathetic response if firefighters develop PTSD. We understand that if ambulance crew, but somehow we're still, the public are still a little bit unforgiving for the police, and there's still this sort of standard that police are meant to live by, which is somehow superhuman and different to the rest of us, and
it's
it's bonkers.
It's so true what you say, and police are human beings, and if you could imagine if you could imagine in any employment, I think there's got to be for understanding, there's got to be a huge gap between making split second mistakes when you're doing something through either your training or it's the best you're doing under huge amount of duress as a mistake than something that is purposeful. And I think people need to really understand that is that it's very easy to be lounge, armchair critics, if you want to call it that, or we call them, the Monday morning quarterbacks saying, "Oh, why I would have done this." But I can hand on heart say, and I've lived it myself, is that 99.9% of police, let's say it's the 1% that don't, but 99% of police will go out there and they will help people. They'll do the best they can, the best they possibly can. And, sometimes it's just that 1% who, and usually they're weeded out quite early if they are that way inclined, or they do become that way inclined, where they've formulated some other sort of thing where they have, a problem with a certain rate, anything like that. But usually 99% of the time, police are there to help you and do their best, and they make mistakes. I mean, you ask anyone in any employment and job, have you made a mistake? I don't think anyone can wholeheartedly say no, but I think people look at the uniform, and they don't look at the person behind it.
There's a lot of stuff about, I know psychologically people project a lot of issues onto authority figures, full stop. And shockingly, all first responders can face violence and threat from members of the public, and can face sort of very unsafe circumstances. I'd like to, if possible, come back to sort of more your story, because you're not here to represent and deal with images and thoughts of the police services. But I think it's an interesting conversation to look at, and we might come back to it. But I'd like to come back to your story as a human being a bit. So you're 19. You almost immediately you're faced with life and death situations, literally. Trying to save somebody who's on the floor, who unfortunately you weren't able to do that. And that would have been a fairly standard experience for you, I guess, that you would have had, if not daily, but certainly weekly, you would have these types of life and death situations that you're in. Yeah.
It's daily.
Right.
That I've seen over 100 dead bodies since that first one. And it's interesting. And I remember being ingrained and vigilant, because they may be different. So, the feelings of, and this is where dark, sort of black humor comes into it.
Yeah.
As a way of surviving, even for myself at the time. And I look back now and feel quite terrible about it. So, and I'll give an example of what I did with my partner at the time. And this is when I was a detective a little bit later in my career, and about the feelings of coping with things that are very distressing for anyone to see. Is you have to remove your emotional part away from what's taking place for survival. Once again, it's a survival mechanism. Yeah. And this was a person who had been hit by a train, and it was a case of, it was a very horrific scene. Yeah. And to survive that, my detective partner at the time, used to be a nurse. And to survive it at the time, this horrendous scene, we played a game of what's that body part.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, no, I understand.
And yeah. And so the feelings to get through that so I was pointing out something, and she was saying, "Oh no, Simon, wrong. That's a kidney." And I went, "Oh, lung." And I went, "Oh, damn, got it wrong again." Yeah. While we're investigating this, but so the feelings associated with that is like I had to escape my inner self to deal with the complexities while doing my job, and that was fine. Like I found I found dealing with the public in that I was very resilient to that as well, because it becomes a mechanism of what you are taught as you go through and work, and nothing surprises me. Nothing at all. You see everything that you could imagine on a television show, or I'd have to deal with. But fundamentally, what happens is that post-traumatic stress formulation and where it starts creeping in is that you're constantly under hypervigilance as well, even when you're on patrol. So walking down the street, and if you could match that back to the military, they might go on deployment and then come back, and then they're off for, let's say, 6 months. But police every day on patrol, and even as a detective, we used to go out and do undercover work. It's a case that everyone around you could be someone who could stab you, for example, or shoot you. So you are hyper vigilant, going into your fight, flight, modes constantly. And then you've got the amygdala, which is the oldest part of the brain, and that's where you have your fight or flight that's formulated from there, your survival part of, as they call it, not going up to the saber-toothed tiger back in caveman times ago, here kitty kitty kitty, you can go, wait a minute, that doesn't look right. So those feelings are always there, but at the time that they are survival mechanisms, and they're used as a way of protecting you, quite obviously, but they're also, when they go further down the track and become ingrained, it becomes unhealthy, because I never had one debrief in 16 years.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I think one of the big differences, I'm talking about the British Army here. I know some of the practice in them. And so one thing that will happen if you go out on patrol in the British Army, you have a debrief at the end of that patrol. For a number of reasons. One is to get the intelligence, but very importantly, it's also to reduce the incidence of post-traumatic stress disorder, and it works. Simply being able to talk about it. So you weren't getting even that level of sort of the ability to offload. So
no, not at all. I investigated one of the biggest pedophile matters in Australia, as well as the lead investigator with another detective sergeant, and I went straight back to my patrol after that, back to 20 to 25 cases, and one was a murder case where I was crying out for help with it, because obviously, but I was on my own investigating it, whilst at the same time it'd be called out at 2 a.m. to someone's been shot, stabbed, sexual assaults, anything like that. And then they take, because they're the fresher case, and your first 48 to 72 hours are critical, they take precedence over the other ones, over those other cases at that time. So what happens, you're always chasing your tail sometimes, and then when you don't, like, you reach out, you go, I need a bit of help here, and you can see you're drowning, and you're the high echelon can't or don't help you. There's also that injury that you face there, or the moral side of things, going, I've got all these other victims that I've got to try to do these other cases for, but I have to put them to the side.
But tell me about this sort of moral injury. It's a term that you use. I've got an understanding of it. What's your sort of, how did it work for you? Because it's a term that's being used at the moment. I might link us to current circumstances and sort of make some more broad sort of connections in a minute. But what is moral injury? What is moral damage? What is?
Yeah, so there's either like the moral injury, which is let's say, like I was saying, as a good example is I got these 20 to 25 cases, which are very serious. Now, if I'm taken away from those cases where I have victims and family of victims and things like that, where I'm then concentrating on other matters, but you're trying to look after them. Say it's, for example, that homicide I had, and I was yelling out for help, I need help. And I'm talking to the family at the same time going, I'm doing my best. I'm doing my best, but I can see I can do more, but I can't possibly physically, mentally, or anything else do more. So I feel morally injured in that I could do more for you and more for these people under those circumstances, but I am handicapped to do so. So that morally hurts you. And the moral injury as well we used to have is whereby when you speak to, in terms of the higher echelon, sometimes in the police, they will with a situation like they said, they'll not bother either helping, or they'll ignore knowing that you're struggling. And so what happens then is that you can lose, or start losing what your faith and your being is in the police, and you feel empty and you feel morally injured, going, you should know, as a person who's been where I've been right now, that I need help, but you're failing to do so. So you feel
happening on two significant levels. One is the internal one, where your own moral code is challenged.
Yeah, your compass,
You're having to fail people, even though you know under certain circumstances you could help. And then the moral injury is coming because then the system seems to have its moral compass out of whack. So you're then in a dangerous system that's promoting these things.
Sorry, no, I didn't mean to talk over you. Even like you feel like you're set up to fail. Does that make sense? Like, and then when we used to call it when the SHIT hits the fan, if it makes sense that. Okay. No, when the shit hits the fan, then sorry. Do you know if I should swear or not? Okay. Yeah. So if the shit hits the fan, and then it turns out to be that by the system, great thing as you said, and you helped me out there. By the system not helping you, you then become the scapegoat in circumstances like that. As, why didn't you do A, B, C, D, E, F, G? And it's like, well, I couldn't do it physically, emotionally, like whatever you put it down to. I did my best, and I reached out for help, and this is the mistrust factor that comes into with post-traumatic stress as well. Is like, why didn't you help me? Why are we here now? And why am I getting the blame when I asked for help? And so that's when police lose that mistrust, and you have to make sure you document everything. So you used to then get on the computer and write an email to your boss after you had a discussion to make sure it's in paper. So if anything would happen later, you have at least documentation to show that you're, doing your best. Yeah, which is a terrible thing to do, but that's.
So again, the system is suggesting it is dangerous. This is a dangerous place, as well as it being dangerous on the streets. As you come back to the office, and then you get these signals that it's not safe, you're not going to be looked after. And I guess also, just because of our earlier discussion, it's then socially, you're sort of, you're not exactly broadcasting the notion to everybody that you meet in the local bar and stuff like that. You're a copper, and you might be reserved about what you do. I know a lot of police who are very cautious, for example, about saying that they're police officers in sort of social situations, because they just don't want the hassle. They don't want people's shit dumped on them. Do you know what I mean? I just don't want to hear it. And so when it comes to, I've sat at dinners with people who I know happen to work in the police, and people say, what do you do for a living? Oh, I'm a civil servant. Oh, that's interesting. And then they skip that, because it's just like too much hassle to then deal with everybody's shit about the fact that I'm a police officer. And so you've got all of these signals saying not safe, not welcome, not wanted, not helped, not supported. And then you're trying to do this incredibly difficult, complex task, which is almost impossible to achieve, which is to be compassionate, maintain your compassionate human response to experiencing things that are not compassionate at all. I want to make a link out, because I think that listen to it, because when before the show we had a conversation, and you agreed with me on this. I think that there's a lot of frontline staff at the moment who are in wards, COVID wards and stuff like that, who are facing something similar to you and facing the possibility of developing PTSD. And you were like immediately going, that's exactly right. So let's talk about that a little bit, because I think it may be, people are listening to this, they're thinking, no, how could that be? This guy is 3 people trying to shoot him and stab him. What's that got to do with me? So let's just break it down a little bit. So what happened to you? Were you put in unsafe situations? You were asked to do things that challenged your beliefs as a human being, but also your professional beliefs about what you want to achieve. You weren't given appropriate support and signals that it was safe to be human, and that we're going to look after you. And you were faced with a lot of things that are like a lot of deaths, a lot of dead bodies. and you were in a very highly pressurized environment so that you were constantly activated. Yeah.
Absolutely.
If I put them in those terms, you know, in that sense, take away the specifics such as guns and knives and etc., then I guess people can begin to understand how that they may be at risk. Other sort of health professionals and social care professionals might be at risk for. You're nodding away. What do you see as the risk? Why is it a risk for them? So,
especially with what we're going through now, and it's right. Like going, and I think our discussion the other day was, and you raised an extremely good point, which is exactly the same, and the crossover from those points and how you made them is, for example, a doctor or nurses who have patients in front of them with COVID or who are sick, and they, which is a huge take on your moral, you know, on your morality and your disorientation from that. Who do I give more attention to, and who don't I give more attention to? And I think there's situations like we discussed as well, is that doctors may have to send people away because they've got to look after this other area.
Yeah, that's definitely happening in the UK, that they were having to free up beds in the hospitals. And they sort of knew that moving particularly older people into care homes was going to put them at more risk of infection, without a doubt. They knew that. But they needed the beds because somebody had more acute medical needs. And there was a whole thing that happened in UK hospitals where they cleared out beds as a way of freeing up space for critical care. And sort of everybody who was involved understood what that meant potentially for the older, frail patient. And but yet they had to do it. And I can tell you unequivocally that I've tried to get, you know, lots of health staff involved in having an open conversation about this, and they're not going to, because they're afraid of the response of their employers. Not going to happen. Not
absolutely
the same way that you're describing that, you know, talking about this openly in your workplace meant forms in triplicate, covering your back, and people going out for you. It's exactly what's happening in the health service at the moment. Without a doubt.
And what you said then is so true, is I have become a huge mouthpiece for emergency services and police, because I can talk now without the fear of persecution.
Yeah.
Because I left the police, and I got medals and ethical, diligent policing, and I became sick. You know, my last day at work, I had a suicide attempt. You know, or ideation, and I just crashed. And so now I can talk and be a mouthpiece for that type of thing, because I'm not subjected to persecution. But people, like you said then, with nurses and doctors, not a chance at all for them to be able to say things that are happening for fear of persecution.
But the point is this: I mean, what you're describing is a situation in which your incapacity, your inability to do job emerged because of those circumstances. Now, my point is this: that, you know, we have frontline staff, and I include in frontline people in the wards, for example. So, like you and I discussed this notion that the first responder has moved from the streets.
Yeah, absolutely.
Still there on the streets, and they're now in the wards. So
yes.
We're encompassing, we've broadened the concept of first responder here. And I think we need to at the moment in this conversation. And now, you know, we still need these people to actually function, without a doubt, because we're not out of this thing. We don't know. We haven't done the first winter yet, so we don't know what's going to happen. But the predictions are that, you know, winter's going to be a challenge, and we may see an increase in numbers because we're inside, and viruses spread when we're inside, etc., etc. And this virus has shown itself to be pretty tenacious in comparison to SARS, etc. So it's not gone yet. It will go away, folks, but it hasn't gone yet. And, you know, most of us that work in health are thinking 2 years to clear this stuff off and really get it sorted out. So this is going to be
even then we're moving into recovery. I mean, we've got post-pandemic recovery. It's
2 years from the pandemic, another 2 years.
Yeah, that's right.
And then the recovery. So this is going to be our first winter. and we're going to see a spike in numbers, etc. And we want our first responders, including our health and care staff in wards and homes, etc., to be able to manage that spike that will happen. And yet we are doing the exact opposite of what we need to do, because what we need to do to help manage this and help people manage is have an open, honest dialogue about how horrible this is.
Yeah,
We need people to be able to say, that was really, I hated myself for having to make that decision. Because that's the only way you prevent moral injury, right?
Oh, hugely. It's talk is therapy. And when you're placing that for understanding and respect that, wow, you were in a tough situation, that understanding, not just from within the system, so within the doctor nursing system as being first responders now, with understanding that you're placed in a difficult situation, and we've got to look now at risk assessment. We've got to look now in furtherance to what our normality of being the job that we're doing. This is a different landscape. And from that is now we're going to have to do harm minimization, where we're going to have to, we're going to have to look at who we can help with the more positive outcome than other. It's a really difficult situation, but when it's laid on the table, and when it's laid on the table with everyone in the same position, and this just goes for anything that happens in communication, is, people sitting at home right now and away from first responders, emergency services, all those types of things, is talk and putting and good communication where it's all laid out on the table is just critical. That I'm not alone. I can get through this. I can talk. I can unpack, because I call it having a backpack. We've all got a backpack. And inside our backpacks, we've all got, there's no one who's walking around this world who doesn't have their own stuff to, that they're dealing with. But when we can unpack that, and particularly unpack that with people on the same, within the same commonality and understanding, it releases a lot of that built up in the backpack, and especially with no persecution. You can't have that persecution that you're then going to be placed in trouble or in a difficult situation because you're talking about something that deep down inside is going against your very being. And that's what's happening now, like with your nurses and your doctors. Absolutely. And they're not getting much respect.
There's this thing as well. There's this thing I think that happens, which is sort of really bizarre, is that you've got this sort of projected image of organisations such as a hospital or the police, and they've got an image that they want to uphold. And I get that, I understand that, but they're afraid of saying what the truth is. So if I give you a simple example from my life, for example, there's a certain amount of, there's really interesting conversations that go on about assisted death, for example. I don't want to get into that, and I'm going to watch my language around it. But my mum died apparently of cancer. Well, she didn't. She died of diamorphine poisoning, and I'm very glad she died of diamorphine poisoning, because it's a painkiller and it killed her without a doubt. But I wouldn't have wanted the cancer to kill her. And she was given a little machine where she could press a button, and at a certain stage of the cancer, it was terminal, and she could press a button and get pain relief. Her heart stopped because of, that's what diamorphine does. Great. Yep. I have no problem with that, personally. Yep. Quite open and honest about that. But but apparently in the UK we don't assist death. Well, we do in that way. All right. And I get it. I mean, I know there are legal ramifications and things like that. And I tell you that I'm really grateful for whoever invented that machine, whoever invented diamorphine, because it cut my mum's suffering hugely. Thank you very much. And so it's that type of thing that is going on at the moment, that people who are working in these systems are being asked to do a sort of double think around what's going on. And this from the police. We've got to say a certain thing we can't actually say the truth of what's happening, and we can't explore the truth of what it's doing to us as human beings. And then you end up with people who are very broken.
Yeah. Yeah, so true. And this is where I look at it, and I hate when this comes into things, but I take this as being political as well for the system and things, and it annoys me when things do become political, because the people who are on that front line, as you're saying, with police, nurses, doctors, all of that, that they are there. Without them, we have no hope, but we're treating them without being able to talk, without being able to unpack what's going on, without all of those necessary survival mechanisms. And talk is, and unpacking is, we're treating them as a commodity, not an investment. It's like burn them out. They've got perhaps we have a registered number, and that's all you become. And then next. But we've got to treat them as a multi-million-dollar investments and look after these people. And the political side of things just needs to be thrown to the wayside and talk. Like, this is what's happening. And people like we're discussing now very openly, we know what's happening. It's happening because there's no other functioning way of, but that a hospital can survive without this happening, with a pandemic as such, that there's not going to be enough hospital beds. And then if it gets worse, it's not
exactly. So we do need a sort of much more mature psychological conversation about these things. I think it's really important to make those connections for people who are currently sort of working in these circumstances, and to understand that the sort of pressures that they're being put on are under, and the impact upon them. And of course, similar pressures are happening in the wider world for the general public as well. And we are definitely all in this together. And let's make some of those points, because you've talked a lot about resilience, and you've also very honestly touched upon something that, not a lot of people are talking about at the moment, is that, quite a few of us are going to be damaged by this event. And we need to sort of come to terms with that now and look at, so resilience is the idea we won't get damaged, essentially. So resilience is this idea that somehow we avoid adverse situations damaging us or leaving sort of long-term damage. So let's look at that for now. You spent 16 years in the police service. You do a great job, but you develop post-traumatic stress disorder, which is a condition that will happen to people no matter what, if you are constantly put in certain types of circumstances, and you will need treatment for it. The great thing is treatment exists, and it's very successful for it. So you come out, how long did it take you, or did it happen while you were in the police force? When did you start to be diagnosed and start to get support and help and all that sort of stuff? What was that bit of the story?
And this is what I talk about. Talk is therapy, and the debriefing and things that we've discussed. And this goes for what we're going through now, for general public, for anyone. Reach out. We've got to talk. You know what I mean? Or see the signs of someone who may be struggling, and reach out to them and talk. Are you okay? Everything going okay? How are you traveling? So we've got to be in this together, but we've also got to, be a team to get through this, and we can get through it, because this will pass. This will pass. So the signs for me, and what happened is that I didn't open up and talk. I didn't, because there was that element of fear I was about to put in for my inspectors to get promoted. And so not opening up, but I had all the symptoms there of post-traumatic stress, the night terrors, all the things going on, the irritability, the not coping, the feeling sort of numb towards my work, feeling just hyper vigilant. I wasn't there. I felt, I also felt, I guess, depressed. I was just down, and as well, So I went and saw my doctor after that last day of work that I ever was working in a police station, and I went about.
And you should remember that you had very strong suicidal ideation at that point.
I did, yeah, I did, and when that happened, I ended up going. And this is the terrible part of it, where you become I never divulged, I never opened up to my wife about what was going on. And even then, I still kept it hidden.
Yeah.
And I used to wake up and get out of bed and go check on my son after this pedophile matter from having night terrors that I investigated, and just stare at him, and I'd break down and cry. But I'd hide it from my wife, or I'd go into the back garden area and hide it from, like a Sid's death that was 13 years previous that reared its head when my little girl was born. And those things can rear its head, but I'd hide it. I keep hiding it. And that's detrimental. That I almost went through divorce with my second marriage. Of my first marriage, this on my second marriage now. And because I hid it, I wasn't communicating because I was worried about the persecution. So after that time in the police station where I did have ideation.
Sorry, it's making me feel angry. It should not have happened to you, particularly fear of persecution. Ridiculous. You know, lonely, Simon. You've been so bloody lonely with all this stuff.
I felt so lonely. Yeah, I was, I think the loneliest I've ever been. And that's, I guess, why in talking with what we're talking about with when I felt battle-hardened and ready for COVID, I'd gone through it. I've gone through the isolation, the loneliness, and that but not good for everyone else. That's what it's going, but we can get through it. I'm still here. You know what I mean? And I went and saw my doctor.
GP, right? You go and see a GP and you go, look, I've just been thinking about hurting myself or something. Is that right?
I broke down. No. So I went and saw my GP, and I still then, my wife said, you should go you've got some moles on your back, go get them checked out. And this was after that day that I had that attempt at work, and I still didn't say anything. And under the guise of getting my moles checked, I went and saw my doctor, and I sat down, hadn't seen him for a long time. And he asked me to, he just asked me, how are you going? Are you all right? Everything all right? And I just went, yeah. And I filled out a DSM-5 and, which is the diagnostic, basically the Bible for you guys, to diagnose people. And I filled out that, and also another one for post-traumatic stress. And I was off the Richter scale for both, for depression and post-traumatic stress. And he said, he gave me that back after I handed it to him in my, the score of what it came up with. And I just broke down. That was the first time, and I could barely talk, and I was just tears coming out, and I was in the fetal position. And he picked up the phone. And he said, "It's okay. We're gonna look after you." And it was the first time, and I could talk, and I just so much to talk about, like all the stuff that I'd gone through, and the injuries within the system, and just the work. And I use the example of a pressure cooker. And I remember Mum, when I was young, the top of the pressure cooker is, my mum used to put the fork in, because I used to hate when she used the pressure cooker, because it meant that she used to mix pumpkin in with potato. Like, and she'd put the fork in and lift the valve up, and it'd go shh. And that's my equation of how I felt when I could finally talk,
right,
without persecution, or knowing someone had my back.
Yeah.
And my doctor, but he made the call, and I'll never forget, I was lying there, I was crying on the floor of his surgery, and just broke down completely. And he made the call to my boss and said, Simon's here, and he's quite ill. He won't be coming into work at the moment. And I just went, shit, there it is.
Mm.
And then I just went into another world then of something that I, throughout my career, I'd sort of had that resilience with, but I wasn't able to talk. And I think having that situation, and I think the first cornerstone of resilience is talk, is being able to talk, and everyone being on the same page, because we all are. All the police I know are on the same page, and they're just going through and being resilient. But you can't maintain you can't maintain yourself with resilience in an adverse environment. That's with kids growing up in a domestic violence situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's going to have impact. And then they go to school and they hide it. Males or females in domestic violence, it's going to have an impact, and you can't be resilient against something that is not going, you don't see light at the end of the tunnel. So when I finally was able to talk, it was such a relief. And resilience is talk. It's as simple as that. And we can get through it together when none of us are alone.
Yeah.
And like with COVID, it will pass. But which, the boosters of resilience and what I use now even, and like I just went through another world of hurt after I left the police with the insurance companies. And that's only just sort of maybe finishing now after 2012, I left the police. I was followed around, I don't know how they can see what's going in my head, but once again, back again, I had identity crisis. Who was I now? What
so these insurance guys were following you to see whether you really were ill and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So I'd see my psychologist and psychiatrist, and they'd say, get outside, go for a walk, get moving, do some gardening, get your hands dirty. So I do things. Yeah. Get out in the sun, go. So my little baby girl, like, it still gets me upset now because they're taking photos. I didn't feel like a man who protects their family. I was so angry. They're taking photos of my kids in the front yard of the house. Like, what the hell? That's my family, my wife. And I didn't feel like a man, and I'd brought this on. Felt like a burden to my family. And I remember it took me an hour to get out of the house to get the fortitude up to take my little girl for a walk just around the shops to get a coffee.
Yeah.
And unbeknownst to myself, it was click, 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 video camera. And then I received a dossier, and once again, go through identity crisis of, am I ever going to get better? What is, because I was still learning about post-traumatic stress myself and becoming more self-aware of myself and the cues. And I received a dossier, and they declined, saying, no, we decline your claim. And it's like paying car insurance for, the 16 years, and then you have an accident and then go, no. That's what it was like. And within that dossier was the photo of me walking my little baby girl around the corner to get a coffee, and photos of me doing gardening in the front yard and things like that. And I gave up, and that pushed me to the precipice again. I had a suicide. Yeah. I thought it was a burden, and that was in 2015. And I had wallet photos, and I still do. And when I'm completely cognitive, and I've transformed my life into finding meaning and purpose again now in helping others, and authored, my book, which is bestseller in Australia through Penguin Books and things like that, and helping others and re-establishing myself saved my life. But it was such a difficult thing. But you've got to find, and this is what I put to everyone, and we all have it there, is look inside yourself with what we're going through now as well, is that everything will pass. And when we find our passion, we can find our purpose.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, it's there. It's just a matter of looking up, and not looking down, and just going, what do I really want to do? And you can do almost anything if you put your mind to it and try to achieve it, because
so again,
it will pass.
It's quite shocking, isn't it, to think that, that you were getting these messages when you're in your job, that to just talk honestly about the circumstances that you were being required to work under would mean disciplinary action, would mean isolation, would mean problems, etc., etc. And then, you confess to someone. It was a confession about feeling broken and psychologically broken, and then again you sort of have this response of that you've done something wrong.
Exactly. It was
that we need for people who finally admit, because you had tried to kill yourself. I mean, and again, that sort of deep skepticism and the stigma, etc. Maybe not as directly, because we don't have the same sort of issues around insurance maybe in the UK. Maybe we do, I don't know. People can let me know. But certainly, to then be confronted with that, and then have to somehow through that find your recovery. What worked for you in terms of, you know, thinking about actual professional interventions as well as what you did in terms of self-help, what were the things that worked for you? Because I think people might be interested in knowing. And certainly, if anybody's listening to this and you're identifying with what's going on, we're going to put up some helpline numbers such as Samaritans, etc., for you as part of it. And James, if you can start sort of looking at some of those and things like, mental health charities that can help people. And we'll, as we, you know, so if you're being triggered by any of this, we will make sure that you'll get links to support organisations and places that you can turn to. And one of the places you can turn to is read Simon's book, to be honest. It's a fantastic piece of work. And we'll make sure there's a link to that as well so you understand it, because hearing somebody else's story can be very healing and opens up. So if you are feeling triggered, that's okay. If you take anything from this show, go and talk to somebody about those triggers. Okay?
Yeah, well said.
So Simon, you have this experience, you then have to fight to get services, but then what did actually work for you in terms of treatments, in terms of self-help things? What helped you move beyond the symptoms into your recovery?
So yeah, it is part of recovery, and that was my weight. Like, I'll give you an example. My weight fluctuates, and that's from medication and things like that. And I've always found that difficult as well. But I got fit, so exercise, which is just proven is exercise, even just going for a walk, things like that. Because what I did is I took the power back. Yeah. In 2015, I sat on my favourite beach after I did have a suicide attempt, and I went, you know what? I was too engaged with the outside negativity of what was taking place that I took the power back to fight. And my passion was always there. Why I joined the police, to help people. And I went, I sat on my favourite beach, and I went, I don't need to be in the police to be able to help people. So then I started, presenting about my story and talking to people and listening to people, and traveling around the country and all that sort of stuff, and speaking to people and being open, honest, authentic, and just, this is what it is, and we're not in it alone. And that was the first kicker for me into negating the outside world and the pressures of that, and letting them become all encompassing on me, and taking the power back for me that. Yeah. They can stuff their insurance up their bum, basically, is what I had in my head. And I'm sorry for being a bit rude, but I just went, you know what? I've got to. Your ass. Yeah, okay. Well, exactly. Shove it up their ass. Yeah. That's fine. No. Well, absolutely. They can shove it up their ass. And I just went, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to take the power back. And I just thought, I'm not going to leave my family. And that's a thing I did as well, is one of the things that I'll never leave. And I really would love people to know about this as well, is that I made a pledge to those photos, because I was saying goodbye to my family in those wallet photos I had. And I wasn't cognitive. I wasn't cognitive at the time. I thought I was a burden. And that's when people say something, people who suicide are selfish. It's, at the time, you think you're doing the most least selfish thing, because you're a burden, you're worthless, you're hopeless, you're lonely. But when you're cognitive, it's the worst thing you could ever do. You go far out. So now what I do is I have those photos with me all the time, and I've made a pledge to them, my kids in those photos, and my wife, I'll never leave you. Yeah. I will never leave you, because I said goodbye to them at the time. And, at the time I was going, and now I have them, and they're always there for me, and they can actually kick in, is that I'm never going to leave you. And I've made that pledge. And I tell other people, just whatever means something to you, make that pledge to them. If you are feeling, you are feeling that way, is making that pledge is so powerful, because it can kick your cognition back in when you're in a bad way. So leading back to your question as well is, I started communicating properly. Yeah. I started talking. I started opening up and letting it be okay not to be okay. Yeah. I wasn't alone. And the amazing part is I speak to so many police and emergency services and other people just in the community, and so many people are going through, and it's refreshing in a way to know you're not alone, and that we've all got our backpacks, and so many people are going through these types of different issues in their life. We've all got stuff going on, but being able to talk, so I feel so much better. Like, just go for a walk. When you go for a walk, like just mindfulness, being in the moment.
Yeah.
So, I try to stop ruminating about the past. I can't change the past. And then, so rumination is going backwards and worry's going forward.
Yeah.
And and then with my worry side of things, I look at, what do I have control of? What can I actually do about something? Here.
Yeah.
Can I do anything here? And then, so it's like a self-awareness checklist. No, I can't. So that needs to just get off the worry list until I can actually make an informed decision about it. I can come back to that. So these are the things I try not to continually worry, albeit, I sometimes have to, I have to pull myself in, and, communication with my wife is essential. And particularly now we're in lockdown and things, communication is key, and healthy communication, healthy boundaries. So giving space and having those healthy boundaries.
Did you say something about medication? Do you use medication as well?
I do, yeah. So I'm on antidepressants. So I take Effexor, and I take, that took me a while to find the right one for me. And once again, with that is don't give up. So with my medication, as much as with finding the correct counsellor, psychiatrist, psychologist, don't give up on that. You will, because you've got to have that rapport, and you've got to have rapport with your medication, because some don't work for different people. Everyone's different. And,
did you find a mental health professional as well to do some counselling with, and was that an important part of your recovery as well?
Huge. Speaking to my GP, I see my psychologist now about once a fortnight.
Okay.
And I see her as, and it's fantastic. I call it a grease and oil change. And in the police, I was a commodity. Now I treat myself more as an investment.
Yeah.
So it's just like a car. It needs, if you don't change the oil in the car, it's not going to keep going. The oil is going to get dirty. So I see my psychologist as a preventative, to keep on top of things for myself. And it's as simple as that. It's unpacking. I talk and we unpack, and and then I get that strength back.
Did you try any sort of the trauma therapies like EMDR and all that sort of stuff? I mean, just interesting, you did or not?
Yeah, I did. I tried EMDR. I tried brain tapping. I think
brain spotting.
Yeah, your brain spotting. Yep. That's the one. That was a while ago. EMDR didn't work the best for me, and once again with that, so CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, is what I use. And that worked great. Also,
mindfulness as well? Did you learn the mindfulness with your psychologist as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Learned mindfulness, and also it's such an easy thing we could do ourselves. There's different apps you can download, and it's just about being in the moment and letting our worries float by like a cloud, just to simply put it. And just you can just sit in a comfortable chair. I do that. It's basically just a release as well, and breathing.
More connected as human beings. It sounds like there's more people in your life now as well. Is that right?
That's a really interesting thing. I still can get anxiety with social type events. So, and COVID's made that more difficult. I have to sometimes get to to go to social events or to go to things where there could be people there that I haven't necessarily taken to from my past, who have caused issues, perhaps, things like that, where I try to stay away from. It's like, if I go to that, and then there's a lot of people that I love that are there, like great friends and all of that. But so I work on that, and recovery is part of that. Is that okay? And so what I do is I think down and I think through. Okay, what's the worst that can happen? Nothing. Like most of the time, I even do a list now of how I feel pre doing something.
Yeah.
And then with my anxiety level, with the excitement that could come about from going, and then I do the post. So pre-going, for example, the anxieties out of 10 is a 9.
Yeah.
Post, the anxiety was a 2.
Yeah.
And that could be going to an event. Excitement before going, or and pleasure out of going to whatever it is, was a 2. Post was an 8 or a 9. And so when you have that, and it's a ready reckoner as well, look at what I thought about, and look at the truth to it. Yeah. And it's such an easy thing to do, where you go,
thought records are amazing.
It's like a diary. Yeah, it's like
I mean, I think it's really impressive, Simon, that you can go to events now with anxiety, but you have your tools to manage them. You go to these events, and also you manage anxiety around people who would have contributed to you feeling really bad about yourself historically, but you can still see them. Which, I mean, I think it's realistic. That response is real. I think a lot of people may come into treatment and think that what's going to happen is all of this stuff is going to be wiped away, clean slate. It's not what happens. It's not what happens. We still have all the stuff. We still have to deal with it, but we just get better at managing it. We get better skills and resources at managing it, but we still have. And the whole point, I guess, is this, that what you tried to do at work was dampen down feelings, and that was the failed strategy. And now you're not doing that. You're managing those bad feelings more in a safer, healthier way, which is fantastic. We're sort of into the last bit of the show, and I did tell you, everybody says to me, oh my God, 90 minutes, that's a huge amount of time. But actually, it's flown by. We're into the last bit of the show already. So, I mean,
wow.
Time it does, doesn't it? It just disappears.
Yeah. Well, as I say, time goes fast when you're having fun.
Yeah,
I guess,
absolutely. One of the things that I'd like to get into a little bit before the end of the show, one of the things we talked about is particularly sort of gender different responses, and I want to talk a little bit about suicide as well with you, and men. So how men respond to sort of mental health issues, and the link with that and suicide, because it's the same in Australia as in the UK, and it's very much a global thing that men make up the vast majority of successful suicides, i.e. deaths. So at least 75% of the people who die from suicide attempts are men. And there's lots of reasons for that. And so sort of, have you focused on sort of men as an issue? I think you have to some extent, haven't you? Just tell us a little bit about some of the things that you've been doing around that.
I've done a lot of focus work on men, obviously being a man myself, and our statistics are very similar to yours. We've got 75%. On average in Australia, we have eight people on average a day who take their life, and 6 out of the 8 are men. Yeah. There's a lot of things that go or contribute, as you said, to that. The methodology, men are more brutal, I guess you could say, in methodology than women.
And there's one of those things that people don't know. For example, single occupancy car accidents are usually men, and there's always a big question: was it an accident? Was it deliberate? And so when you start to add those numbers into count them as suicides, the numbers of men successfully killing themselves actually goes through the roof. I mean, it's extraordinary. So, crashing a car is a very, very sort of seriously dangerous thing to do, or driving off a cliff.
That's right. And the other thing, when you get toxicology that comes out of that, you find alcohol will usually be something that will, something that I've gone through myself with using alcohol, because it numbs the pain and things like that. So driving a car, exactly what you said, single occupancy, but then toxicology is done. It could be, put down in the wrong area as being alcohol related, but it's not that at all. It's there's the ideation, and that's where it's come from with suicide. So you're exactly right.
Between men drinking and alcohol and violence and accidents and deaths as well, there's a clear link them as well.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So the work I've done with men is the main thing with men is it's about look, and we had a discussion about this, and it's very true in what you said. Men do talk.
Yeah,
and I think it's true.
I constantly hear people saying, but one of the reasons all this happens is because men don't talk. I think that's absolute bull. Men talk, really, really, really do.
Yes.
You judge the content, and it's not the content that's important. It's the connection between people that's important.
Yes, and the other thing as well is when men talk, and it's about, I think, rather than women, with men, it's more about focusing in on the signs, focusing in on what's going on. So it takes more of people who are connected to men or a man to notice those signs and symptoms and words used. I can't take it anymore.
Yeah.
I'm sick of it.
Yeah.
So they are talking, but they're not talking as much as we'd like to say is they're going to verbalize it completely. But they are talking, they are showing, and there's going to be signs. And so they go off the grid.
They're communicating. And, all like 75% of communication is non-verbal, is context, situational. And again, we can see that and we can pick up on it. And the verbal bit of communication is a small part of it. It's significant, it's important, but it's a small part of it. And the communication is happening. So I'll give you a good example. There's a sort of, I think it's there's a thing called Battersea Power Station, I think it is, or part of Battersea, which is a building project here in London. Now, typically building projects are male dominated, and therefore have a lot of suicides, without a doubt. I think it's that one. I think it's Battersea Power Station have had no suicides because they've had successful interventions in the workplace that have meant that there've been no suicides in that workplace. Okay, well, it can happen, right? And this is a male environment in which they've set up systems. One of the things is they set up this chill out room.
Yep.
Where the rules are, if you go into that room, you're allowed to talk about stuff.
Yeah. How simple.
You know what I mean? That's the magic. And it's like they made up this rule. Right, you're allowed to talk about stuff in his room. They have to. It's like, okay, is that?
Yeah.
Does that mean men don't? Well, no, men do talk if you give them the opportunity and the appropriate sort of space and resources, and you don't judge the communication that you're getting. You welcome. Work with.
Yeah. No judgment, and that's what I say. And I actually turn around and talk about when men seek help, and because I was that paradox, is for the group around a man who seeks help is to champion them. Yeah. How strong are they? How brave are they? Yeah. What a champion! What a legend! What a far out! He's the guy because he's gone and put his hand up. He's gone against the grain. Because men don't seek help as much as they talk, but they mightn't pick up the phone or they mightn't go and see someone. But how strong are you when you go and do that? You're going against the grain. That's strength. That's courage. And when we get people surrounded by that and going, did you hear that? Bill went and saw, a psychiatrist. He went and saw someone because he's financially not doing too well, whatever it may be. It can be anything. What a legend.
Yeah.
Good on him.
Behaviour, which is what you're describing, is absolutely of everything, isn't it? And one of the issues, I think, one of the reasons why men make up such a high rate in the suicide is that often, and again, it's not as simple as men don't talk. It really is a bugbear for me hearing that one. So anybody knows me, don't ever say that to me because I'll bite you. But one of the reasons why men end up killing themselves is that they downplay or they minimize the symptoms that they're having, and they say to themselves and to other people, "Oh, it's not as bad as somebody else. It's not as bad as." So as mental health professionals, myself, and as you as an advocate, you get this with mental health issues or psychological distress, you want to get it as soon as possible. You don't
early intervention.
Until it's serious.
Yeah, the earlier the better.
That's what they're doing. They're waiting until it's serious, and then it feels like it's too serious to deal with, like you trying to kill yourself on your last day.
That's right.
It's like that's inevitable if you don't get that early intervention.
That's it.
Earlier I can't say this enough, the earlier the intervention with psychological distress, the better it is, because then you learn these tools that you're describing, Simon, the resilience tools and the ability to, reality test, the ability to do your MOT, your emotional MOT, which I think is a brilliant idea. Everybody should have one of those, and make sure that your functioning is okay. If you learn those tools at an early stage in psychological distress, you can actually often just knock it on the head and never have it again. And then when a pandemic happens, you're sort of all right. You just go, hang on, what is all those tools I was taught?
That's it. Yeah, it's like having a tool. Yeah, it's like having a tool belt. I tell Ben, you got a tool belt. You got your hammer. Your hammer resembles torque.
Yeah.
So when you see a hammer, like you're in a construction site, that hammer is about torque. So it's a reminder as well. And then you got something else here, mindfulness, and it's okay not to be okay. And this here is whatever. They're just reminders, and little, just little reminders for people to understand that, like we're vulnerable, but we don't have to remain vulnerable.
Yeah.
We can reach out if we need to, and early intervention is key. The number one thing is early intervention, and talk is the first part of that in reaching out. And men, you're right, men do talk. It's just a different formulation of the talk. And I think it's, what is it? The 68-70% of the actual context of communication is through, as you said, not through what is said, but more about the signs.
Yeah. And also, what we want is, emotional regulation comes from relationship, and relationship is, the vast majority of relationship is non-verbal. And that is there, it does exist, and there's some great ways in which men are non-verbally communicating with each other and supporting each other all the time. I think one of the challenges though during the COVID times is that a lot of those events and possibilities, the sports, the events, the pub, that sort of stuff, which are all good things, have not been available. So I think that there are particular pressures on guys, and there is a need for what you're describing, which is better emotional intelligence.
Absolutely.
You have to verbalize these things and do the shorthand version of that. It's definitely a skill that needs to be given. And again, my experience of working with guys is that once you start framing it as, these are just tools and resources, emotional intelligence, emotional insight, it's just a thing you learn and you do it. And then you practice it. Like you learn how to use your phone, like you learn how to drive a car. You learn how to do emotional intelligence. That's right. And then you practice. Get good at it.
It becomes autonomous, because you've done it. Yeah, like when you drive a car, you don't even think you're driving a car or changing the gears or whatever. It's just autonomous. So, and that's right. And practice.
What I want to do, because we are really coming to the end, and we've got about 5 minutes left before James will steam in and say, "Leave me alone, I want to go."
He's not there. He's gone, I think.
No, he's there. He's sort of in the background. He might be having a chat with some French bod somewhere, but I'm sure he's there, hanging on our every word. And if he's not, I'll go and sort him out. But what's remarkable is sort of just hearing your story. This 19-year-old boy that goes in. Almost the first thing he does is, trying to save somebody's life and feel completely overwhelmed by that. You go through your career in the police. You end your career very, very broken, trying to kill yourself, and you then have another suicide attempt. And yet here you are, Simon, not a survivor. You've gone beyond survival, as far as I can see. You're well into recovery. You're well into what I would think of as transformation. That you transformed these experiences into something else, into something that is healing and helpful for other people. And you seem to have, it's a remarkable story. It's a remarkable achievement.
Thank you.
So thinking about yourself now, I know that you're a dad, you're a husband. Tell us about this real world stuff, because that's the really important stuff. Because I think that, the saddest thing that happens, particularly to professionals in the helping professionals, is that they end up giving so much of themselves that they have nothing left. You know, they don't have the family, they don't have the kids, but you do. So tell us something about that, about the really important stuff in your life, these munchkins that you have. And
Yeah, look, absolutely. I've got a 6-year-old devil. She's beautiful. That's my 6-year-old. She's gorgeous. She's got me around her finger. So I've got her. She's wonderful. And then I've got a 14-year-old. Sorry, God, goes quick. He just turned 15, actually, boy,
right.
and a near on 17-year-old daughter. So got a couple of 15. I can't believe I'm saying that. So yeah, look, and a beautiful, supportive wife, and she. The communication and how we went through a really rocky period, and the communication of knowing the signs. So we know the signs of each other. We're really, in depth in that, and just small things that we use, and we get on really well. And COVID's taken a bit of its toll, like it hasn't anyone. You know what I mean? Because you're stepping on each other all the time, and so that's why boundaries and communication is so, and healthy communication is so important.
Yeah.
And I've got a great family, but it's about enrichment, and people who are on their own, find things in your life, and even going through this, that enrich your life. Get back to those, just the small pleasures that you never really got to do because you were at work all the time, or you were, whatever it may be. Is find those small pleasures and things that you can do, and it's just a bit of a mind map, and just searching for what they are, because the grass is never green on the other side. Is sometimes it gets overwhelming. When I was doing homeschooling with my daughter, I'd go, oh, if I was a single bloke now, I'd be at home with my feet up watching the television. You know what I mean? It's the grass is sometimes we always think greener, but it's not. And we've got to, our life is our life, and we've got to be, we've got to just find those points of, enrichment, and enrich our lives, no matter who we are or what position we're in. And I think knowing, and that's what I tell my kids, the scaremongering part and social media, being careful of social media.
And it's interesting, isn't it? I think that, just thinking, because, I've been suicidal many years ago, but I do remember it. I remember what it was like, and thinking about how dark and damaged I felt inside, that led me to want to think about ending this stuff. Now, you're the same person with the same experiences, but now those experiences uplift you, and they encourage you and inspire you to want to stay alive and stay connected with your children and your wife. And it's fascinating, isn't it, that we go, same person, same experiences. It's not like somebody's given you and cut out your memories of things. You've still got them. You've still got all of that stuff. But somehow now it nourishes you rather than destroys you. I think that's really important to hear. And it hasn't taken 25, 30 years. It's a relatively quick task, and these things are now feeding you. Like they say, the image is like a lotus, isn't it? A lotus sits in shit.
Yes.
And it
yes.
comes out of the shit. And that's what you've done, And I think that's really important to reflect upon, because I think anybody who's in the dark place, who's in the shit now, the lotus is available. It really is.
It's there. It's just a matter of if you need support, getting that support, and you can find it. And it's looking inside yourself, just finding your passion and your purpose again. Finding it's there, and passion and purpose take away those 3 hallmarks that a lot of us are going through now, and it's worthlessness, hopelessness, and loneliness. They're the 3 hallmarks. If we can counteract them and individually, but also with friends, with family, or with joining groups that there's so many groups now online that you can join, that you don't have to be lonely, and you can connect. And it's just a matter of finding out who you are, what your passion and purpose is, truly deep down, and fulfill it, enrich your life. And this will pass. Do something now that will enrich your life. And we're all in it together. We are, it's no clear sailing for anyone. But
without doubt. I mean, it's just been wonderful to have you here today.
Thanks, Noel.
Our tomorrow You're our future, because you're in Thursday and we're in Wednesday.
You guys are way behind in everything.
No, no, you are our future.
Yeah.
No, and also he thinks, folks, he thinks 9 degrees is cold.
It's a balmy, balmy 9 degrees.
No idea, do they? They have absolutely no idea what cold means. But
do you know what it's like being down at a sandy beach in Australia when it's 28 degrees? It's terrible.
28 degrees. But we call that a heat wave over here.
Oh God, you'd all burn.
It's been really, really inspiring to have you on. Folks, we're at the end of the show, and next week we'll do a rerun because I'm going to be away and having a bit of a break, and then the week after we'll be back live. It's been wonderful to have Simon on, a really honest guy, and if you've been touched by this, if it's triggered some strong feelings on you, we will put links, like I say, to organisations that you can reach out to. If you're feeling suicidal now and you're thinking about it, get in touch with the Samaritans. The number will go out, and Samaritans are fantastic about that stuff. There's also things like the Mental Health Foundation and various organisations that will point you in the direction of. The most important thing is that you go and ask for help from somebody. And then the second most important thing is you never stop asking for help till you get it. All right. So really, really fantastic show. Really inspiring guy, Simon. What amazing guy. We'll bring you back again, Simon, and catch up.
Yeah, love to.
Some other points. Going to say goodbye for now, and then I'll catch up with you live in a couple of weeks' time. Thanks.
Thanks, Noel.